and that's the thing, is a lot of them get forgotten because, we have the museum at the state hospital. People don't really know about Fairview. They don't talk about the people who lived there. My name's Melanie Ground, and I worked at Fairview from 95 to 99, and I've lived in Oregon, Salem my whole life, so I've always known about Fairview and the history of it. And then, I've had friends, family that have worked there over the years, so there's lots of stories about Fairview. So Fairview was originally started as a home for the developmentally disabled. When it was deeded to the state of Oregon in 1901, the man that deeded it, he deeded the entire property, all of his acreage as property, to the state of Oregon. And the way he worded it in his will, and we cringe about this today, but the way he worded it was to provide a home for the handicapped and feeble-minded. That was how, back then, that's how they referred to people who were mentally retarded, developmentally disabled, intellectually disabled. But when they had first started Fairview, they took in basically any children that were, deemed unwanted. There were clients that were physically, mentally sound. The only thing was that they had been born blind, and their parents had been advised to leave their children at Fairview because it would be too much of a burden to care for them. They had a working hospital at Fairview. They had a working farm. They had orchards. They had pig barns. They had dairy cows. They had silos with grain. They were all self-contained, self-sufficient. They had their own schools. And so the doctors lived on the grounds, and there was one doctor that lived there who believed that because the clients were mentally retarded, they didn't feel pain and refused to use anesthesia when he would perform surgeries on them. So like when I worked at the infirmary, the old OR, the old operating room, was closed at that point, but you would still go back and check it. We had to check doors and stuff at night. And you would go in, you'd walk into the operating room, and you would feel the hair on the back of your neck just stand up because the imprint in that room was just, you could feel it. You could feel it. The records room used to be the morgue. So you take the old freight elevator down to the records room, and it was just creepy because there's big drawers where you knew there used to be bodies in there, but now there's records. So it's a very creepy place when, you think about it and you think about the history of what happened there. That's the dark side of Fairview that people don't talk about is, there were clients that were really, the only reason they were at Fairview is because they scored low enough on an intelligence scale to be considered mentally disabled, but they should have really been housed in a psychiatric facility. And so there were a lot of people that we called them institutionalized because they had lived there their whole lives. They had no idea how to operate independently on their own. They didn't know how to not have somebody telling them what to do every part of their day. And there were clients that were abused by staff. Even when I worked there, we had staff that, got fired and arrested for abusing clients. And so it wasn't like it was all peachy keen, hunky-dory, But the work that we did and the people that worked there that actually cared about working there, it made it it made it better for the people. One of the things that I loved is every year they would do a 4th of July parade, and we would have a carnival, and we would have a big 4th of July celebration all over the whole grounds. So all cottages got to compete and build their own float, and we would do a parade that would go all through the grounds. And so there's a picture of me in there on our float. That year the theme was 50s and 60s. And so our float was a big VW bus, and our clients' wheelchairs were the wheels of the bus. And that was the good things that we did at Fairview. They really were a community. When I started working there, the Department of Justice had taken over monitoring all of the institutions in Oregon, and to make sure that money was being used fiscally responsibly, because Fairview took up a huge amount of the state's budget, huge amount. And so they had determined that the money could be better used to provide care for these people if they were in smaller community programs and smaller homes, rather than one great big institution with all this overhead. If we had them in individual homes with smaller units, they could be better served. What they didn't understand is that a lot of those people had lived at Fairview their whole lives. And you're now moving somebody who's 70 years old out of his home that he's lived in since he was a baby. They don't know anything else. And so for some residents, yes, it may have been a better choice, but for other residents, it was very, very detrimental to them. And it was really traumatic for the staff watching their people get moved. I saw the majority of the clients there either being taken home by staff and staff took clients into their home and opened their own foster care homes. And then the majority of them moved into what was called the state-operated community programs. And so it's small group homes run by the state of Oregon. So they're still clients of the state. And they're being cared for mostly the same way they would at Fairview. The difference is, so at Fairview, all of their services came to them. Physical therapy came to them. Respiratory therapy came to them. That was the big thing that I noticed, was the access to services was limited when they moved out to the community programs. But when they first closed Fairview, we had a lot of residents that lived there that were actual sex offenders. But because they were considered mentally retarded, they weren't incarcerated. They were living at Fairview. And so they weren't allowed to leave grounds without supervision. They had to have 2 staff to 1 client because they were considered a danger to the community. And they took these clients. They're not still there now, thank God. But when they first moved them out, their plan was to move them to a cottage on the grounds of the state hospital, which sounds great in theory, until we saw where they had the cottage placed. And it was literally 10 feet away from the Head Start, with nothing but a chain link fence in between them. And the staff at Fairview were like, you can't put those clients in that. You can't do that. And they did anyway. And the first thing that happened was one of the guys exposed himself to the little kids at the Head Start, like right off the bat. They didn't listen. Then they had to move everybody. So, it's like, are they safer? I don't know. I'm sure there's more safeguards in place now than there was, but there are still people like that are in programs that they're not as heavily supervised. I think that if they had done more to talk to the staff that actually knew the clients as well as we did, to address the concerns for the care of the clients, and let the staff that had been caring for those clients go and view where they were going to be placing them and make recommendations, it would have been a much smoother transition. And I think they should have still left a portion of Fairview open for a lot longer for the elderly and the aging clients, instead of making them move at the end of their life, letting them finish out their years in a smaller setting but on that same grounds. It would have been a lot less traumatic for them, because we had a lot of clients that died within a month of being moved. They just gave up, which was really, it was hard for me. It was hard for me watching some of my people that I knew shouldn't be leaving. One of the clients that was housed at Social Skills, his father was actually a Oregon State Supreme Court judge. And when that boy had been born and his parents were told that he was, mentally retarded, they were told to just leave him at Fairview and forget they ever had him. There's a lot of those stories out there. Some of those people have some of the most amazing stories and some of those heartbreaking stories too, And that's the thing, is a lot of them get forgotten because, we have the museum at the state hospital. People don't really know about Fairview. They don't talk about the people who lived there.
I hear the drizzle of the rain, like a memory it falls, soft and warm, continuing, tapping on my roof and wall. And from the shelter of